We can start our webinar. Good afternoon, and very welcome to all of you. We have many people registered, but we will see how many will join. And those who joined, thank you very much for joining us today for the webinar offered by the European School Education Platform with the European Commission on the occasion of the European Mental Health Week 2025 that we are celebrating this week, and there will be many events and activities during this week. My name is Pijaca Plavšić. I come from Croatia. Greetings from Zagreb. I work as an independent educational expert, but I'm also a member of the editorial board Toolkit for Schools, and I will be the moderator of today's webinar. Our topic today is both timely and essential, I would say. Well-being, inclusion, school success. These are all the topics that we will explore in our today's webinar. We will be exploring how schools across Europe can create more inclusive, supportive, and successful learning environment by focusing on the well-being of all learners and all teachers. In particular, we are very pleased and excited to introduce the very newly developed self-assessment tool on inclusion and well-being, which will support teachers and school leaders in evaluating and improving school practices. But also, we will have opportunity throughout this webinar to also learn about guidelines for promoting mental health and well-being in educational setting. We are honored to be joined by an exceptional panel of speakers from policy, research, practice. And our panel today includes Ms. Pia Ahrenkilden Hansen. We will have a video message from her. She is Director General at the DG Education, Culture, Youth and Sport at the European Commission. We are very pleased to have her video. Also, I am very pleased to introduce Ms. Anna van Duinwerde. She is the chair of the Developmental and Educational Psychology Unit at Leiden University. Anna, welcome, and thank you for joining. We also have Cosmin Adam. He's an educational expert based currently at the Center for Research and Studies in Sociology at the University Institute of Lisbon. He is also a consultant for many European Commission working groups, but also working group on schools, pathways to school success. He's a member at the editorial board of the European Toolkit for Schools. Cosmin, welcome. It's good to have you on board. And last but not the least, Oana Feleson, a policy officer in charge of equity and well-being within DG EAC at the European Commission. Oana, welcome as well. Before we begin, I would just like to give you a few practical notes. You are welcome to post your questions in the chat at any time during the session. We actually encourage you to do so because at the end we will have at least 15 minutes for the discussion. Please note that also all questions that you will put in the chat during our webinar, I will collect them and we will ask our panelists to reflect on your questions. Also, I just wanted to say that all presentations during our today webinar will be uploaded at the website, at the European Commission ESEP website, and the webinar will be uploaded at the YouTube. So I think with having you all on board, let's begin our today's webinar, our journey of reflection, learning and collaboration. And now it is my pleasure to give floor or to video message from Ms. Pia Ahrenkilden Hansen. She will open today's session with a keynote message highlighting the importance of well-being and inclusion.
Hello, everyone. I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar. Thanks to all of you, school leaders, educators, and policymakers, for joining us this afternoon. Today, during the European Mental Health Week, we're here to connect, reflect, and act to promote young people's mental health and well-being. Of course, including learning environments where everyone feels safe and comfortable to express themselves are important preconditions to well-being at school. With the Commission's revised self-assessment tool on inclusion and well-being, we want to help enhance young people's mental health and well-being both in and outside of school. Across Europe, the conversation on mental health in education has never been more urgent. Evidence from the World Health Organization reveals that adolescents today, especially girls, experience poorer mental health than in previous generations. Around the world, 1 in 7 young people between 10 and 19 suffer from mental health issues, with depression, anxiety, and behavioral disorders being among the leading causes of illness and disability among adolescents. This has serious effects on young people's overall health and general well-being. The latest OECD PISA results demonstrate the knock-on effects on young people's performance in education. Strikingly, a sense of belonging is associated with a 13-point increase in mathematics performance, the PISA assessment shows, while exposure to bullying is connected to a 10-point drop in performance in the same test. Enhancing basic skills developments go hand in hand with promoting student well-being, which is also reflected in the action plan on basic skills that the Commission presented recently and in our Pathways to School Success initiative. In the recent years, we have seen education systems across Europe moving towards a more holistic approach to education, one that acknowledges children and young people's needs for a balanced set of cognitive, social, and emotional competences and skills to reach their full potential. With the support of the EU's Erasmus Plus program, schools and teachers across Europe are teaming up to strengthen pupils' mental health and well-being. Since 2021 alone, Erasmus Plus has funded more than 350 projects promoting well-being. And initiatives like our e-twinning community are empowering teachers to work together online to share their knowledge and experiences. Today, with the launch of the self-assessment tool, we add a new tool to our toolbox. As part of the action plan on basic skills, the tool has been developed with and for schools. The self-assessment tool offers a structured way for Europe's schools to examine just how inclusive and supportive their learning environments are. It provides a range of indicators to help to evaluate their policies and practices, but strengthening inclusion and well-being in our schools isn't about ticking boxes. It's about creating space for reflection, co-creation, and a culture of continuous improvement. Whether your school is at the beginning or well advanced on its journey, this tool can help your local education community move confidently forward together. The tool has been put in place with the help of a dedicated group of experts, drawing on the knowledge of specialists in education and psychology, and of course, education and training practitioners. I'd like to thank our e-twinning community and teachers panel for testing the tool and providing their feedback. Your knowledge and experience are invaluable. Soon we will also be sharing the experts' final report on enhancing supportive learning environments for vulnerable learners and promoting well-being and mental health at school. This report will include a set of guidelines for policymakers and educators. The guidelines are already available online for you to discover. They offer a practical and accessible resource designed by and for Europe's schools, because inclusion and well-being isn't something that happens by itself. It takes focused efforts and reflection on what's working and where we need to improve. Building on our broader work to foster peer learning, cooperation, and exchange. Promoting well-being at school is key to delivering on the ambition of our Union of Skills initiative. to upskill and reskill Europe to face up to challenges like climate change and strengthen the EU's competitiveness, and to equip young people to reach their full potential and pursue their dreams in life. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to end here to give us time to discuss the tool and our work to promote more inclusive, more supportive schools for Europe's learners, our teachers, staff, and school leaders alike. Thank you for your engagement and keep up the great work.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pia Akring-Hilden Hansen, for opening the session with a strong message of the commitment from the European Commission. I'm sorry that I hear that some people, including myself, at some point had some trouble with seeing and hearing the video, but for me it was only a few seconds. So I'm sorry for the technical issues. I think it's always like that when we are having a webinar, that we have some technical issues, but I mean, we can work with that as well. So the video will be uploaded now, as Marta said. The video is posted at the webinar webpage, so you can have it. You can take a look there. And now I think we can move on. It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Anna van Duinwerde from the University in Leiden. Anna will present the well-being guidelines. We had some opportunities to hear about well-being guidelines, which are developed for policymakers and educators, and they are offering very practical approaches to foster students' well-being and learning environment. So Anna, please, the floor is yours. I'm looking really forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Amy. And I hope you can all hear me. I'm looking at, but I see some nodding faces. Great.
Yes, yes, we can hear you and we can see your presentation.
Happy to see that. I'm honored to be here today. I'm Anna van Duinwerde. I'm the chair of the Developmental and Educational Psychology Unit at Leiden University, the Netherlands. I'm a developmental psychologist focused mostly on adolescents' well-being and development. I'm very honored to present these guidelines that we drafted on for policymakers and educators as being part of the expert group, and tell you a little bit about the road we have traveled together. Let's see whether this works. Yes. Okay, so the activity of the expert group that you heard already a little bit about from Ella and from the video is part of the Pathway to School Success group, and their goal was to develop certain recommendations to achieve better educational outcomes for all learners. In their recommendations, in the guidelines they presented, they showed that reducing low achievement is to improving basic skills in schools, to ability to increase secondary educational attainments for all learners. And the final recommendations was also to promote well-being at school. And from this basic element of promoting well-being in school and the importance of that, an expert group was formed. So as part of this Pathway to School Success initiatives, this expert group on supporting well-being and inclusion at school was formed as a flagship initiative of the European education area. Here you see the experts when we first started. I think this was even before we started our first meeting. They include researchers, academic teachers, school principals, teacher trainers, school and child psychologists. And we took a real close look at the topic of well-being, inclusion and resilience in schools, both for teachers and for learners, and the importance of creating a healthy learning environment, so to say. We are actually nationalities from all over Europe, and our objective was threefold. So first, we wanted to develop guidelines on a systemic whole school approach for well-being. We actually developed guidelines on different levels, both for the policy level and school level. Our second goal was to propose a self-assessment and self-improvement toolkit on well-being at school and identify the best practices, something that Cosmin will tell more about. And we also had some awareness raising activities at EU and at the national level. So to show where we started, we used a NESIT evidence-informed framework on a whole system, whole school approach to well-being and mental health. So our goal, one of our goals, the first goal I mentioned, was to draft this evidence-based policy recommendations and guidelines to address the well-being challenges that the young people and teachers are facing today. So both children and teenagers, what we already heard in the video, experience a current decrease of well-being and mental health, which has been coupled to a decline in school performance, but also the impact on educational experience, their later potential to participate and contribute to society, but also teachers. We see that their well-being is declining. There's a lack of adequate resources, training and support, and this also impact the attractiveness of the profession and lead to teacher shortages. So we both focused on well-being of children and teenagers and the well-being of teachers, which is seen as an important channel to improve also the well-being of children and teenagers. So if we look at the pyramid on the right, we actually see here a framework where we started from. So this universal approach where actually all pupils are supported to develop and maintain their well-being, both in terms of mental and physical health, to reduce risks and build social and emotional competences, resilience and supportive environments for well-being. I will come back to that later. Then you see a more targeted support where we developed or drafted recommendations to identify individual or social risk factors so that students at risk of experiencing mental health conditions can be provided with additional targeted support. I will also come back to that. And then indeed there's a small group at the individual level which will really need support to improve their well-being with health professionals and agencies. So the wheel that you see on the right, so the whole system, whole school approach, illustrates several domains, several main pillars, so to say, which are important to nurture well-being and mental health in a whole school approach. These different parts are actually highly interconnected and overlapping, and also are together shape some of the recommendations drafted in this group, which we will come back to also later. So I know that you can't access these links right now, but if this presentation is shared, I hope you can access the link and see the full experience of the guidelines that and the recommendations that we drafted both for policymakers and for schools separately. With the recommendations that are in here, we hope to achieve inspiring practices to assist the policymakers, school leaders, teachers in implementing this comprehensive approach. And yeah, I think these hopefully speak also to the audience that is here today. So besides this version for policymakers and this version for schools, there are also a couple of fact sheets developed for easy communication, for setting some of the importance in the different recommendations drafted by this expert group. But well-being, as we said, is also a theme which is important to disseminate the importance for our youth today. For instance, one of the activities that was there was well-being as a monthly theme on the European School Education Platform, and as an annual theme on the European Innovative Teaching Award, which is actually last year. I think some of these links are accessible when you download the presentation and might be of interest to you. So this is a visual of some of the fact sheets that were developed, for instance, on topics related to the recommendations that we drafted, such as well-being in a digital age, social and emotional learning, and academic achievement. And I think these might be helpful in a quick overview of some of the recommendations, whereas the reports are a more detailed support of the recommendations drafted by the expert group. So what are these recommendations, which I have been talking about? So here you see an overview of actually the 11 recommendation to implement this whole system, whole school approach, so this wheel and this pyramid that I showed on the slide. And these recommendations actually focus on building competencies, for instance, through social and emotional learning, safeguarding physical activities and nutrition, ensuring equity. But they also focus on sustainable capacity increases, such that policymakers should take into account additional resources, for instance, needed for teacher training and professional development, which is a very important pathway to stimulate the well-being of our learners. But also to empower educators themselves to innovate their teaching, to include youth, to this co-creation as a central element in shaping their learning experience, and in effectively supporting educators and youth through building robust networks with stakeholders from different sectors. So all of that is encompassed, is included in these 11 recommendations. In the guidelines that are drafted, these are explained in more detail. I think for now, I wanted to briefly walk through how these recommendations are tied to the several levels of the pyramid that I introduced. So some of the recommendations you can see target more at the universal approach, where all pupils are actually supported to develop and maintain their well-being, both in terms of their mental and physical health. For instance, by creating this positive school climate, active participation, and the empowerment of learning, this co-creation element also that we mentioned. By integrating the social and emotional education into the curriculum, which is evidence-based informed element to improve well-being of learning of our learners. This fostering of collaborative partnerships, by fully integrating well-being principles into teacher education, which refers to the goal of including the well-being of teachers to promote also the well-being of learners, and strengthen the capacity of our school leaders to address well-being at school. So in addition to these universal recommendations, there are also a couple of recommendations that target more this targeted approach, where actually students at risk or that experience mental health condition can be provided with more targeted support in small groups or at an individual level, and potentially also in collaboration with health professionals and agencies. For instance, safe schools to prevent and address forms of violence. Addressing violence at school is really a joint effort. Not only preventing, but also providing support, oversight, and a community in everyday attitudes and words and actions at school. But also digital, promoting well-being in the digital age. Digital and media tools at this moment are part of the lives of our children and teenagers. We recommend in this guideline that we should consider the effects of its widespread use in education, on how what effects it has on the well-being of the school community. We also mention elements to create a harmonious environment that nurture both actually the intellectual and the emotional growth of our learners. One part of this recommendation also refers to the continuous professional development and support to educators that is mentioned here, and also other members of the school staff to receive in their school practice. In this way, continuous professional development should really be seen as an investment in the well-being and also in the learner outcomes, rather than a cost. And the 10th recommendation mentioned here focuses on an equitable educational system, promoting inclusion and diversity, where we describe elements to remove barriers that hinder children in meaningful participation in education, and that this really is a precondition for promoting academic success and well-being at school. So a final recommendation, our 11th recommendation, is more targeted to this targeted support or in the individualized support level in this pyramid, where indeed adequate training and support should be in place for schools and for teachers so that they can play a key role in the early warning and the early identification of mental health conditions. We believe that school must be equipped to provide additional support either in small groups or in individual settings to the learners in need. And in our guidelines, we provide certain recommendations and hope to identify best practices, what interventions are most effective when school staff, professionals, parents, and learners work together as a team, which seems to be a very important element to guarantee the well-being of learners with mental health needs. So our mandate was placed already a year ago. As I mentioned, we developed these guidelines with these 11 recommendations on a systematic whole school approach for well-being at different levels, so both at the policy level and school level. These guidelines that you now see are presented in English, but there's actually a translation of the guidelines to all EU languages, which is something that we're currently working towards and hopefully will be finalized sometime this year. I'm looking at Tawana, if she agrees. But also what we're still working on is a detailed version of the guidelines that's out there also in the upcoming time. And also, which is launched today, which Cosmin will present in a bit, the self-assessment and self-improvement toolkit on well-being at schools, for well-being at schools, which we're very enthusiastic about. Our guidelines, besides these recommendations, also identify some best practices from all of our participating EU states, and I think that that might be hopefully also an inspiring document there for many of the people here today to see what kind of best practices are identified by this group of experts. So I wanted to thank you for your attention and also look forward to the talk of Cosmin afterwards. And I hope that these guidelines will provide support and inspiration for you in your own practices. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, very much for this interesting presentation and presenting the guidelines for well-being. It's a very good message from you that the guidelines will be translated in all EU languages. I think everybody is very happy with that. It's extremely useful tool for schools. So yes, we will have a little bit more time later for the questions and thoughts on the topic. I see again that we have some technical issues. So it seems that if you are connecting through the app, Teams app, then you have some kind of troubles. But if you are connected through the browser, then it seems everything works. But this webinar will be uploaded to YouTube. So if you had technical issues, you can check it out later. Maria Elena and Marta shared links to the well-being guidelines, but it will be also posted to the website. So I think we can go on. I'm inviting now our next speaker, my dear colleague, Cosmin Nada, who will present the very newly developed tool, self-assessment tool on inclusion and well-being. He will explain the structures and, most importantly, how schools can use it and how it supports the development of inclusive and supportive school policies and practices. Cosmin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ellie, and good afternoon to all the attendees. I see we have more than 100 colleagues attending this webinar. It's very good to see that. And I will share now my presentation of, as Ellie mentioned, the self-assessment tool on inclusion and well-being. Ellie already presented myself, but just to highlight that I am a researcher in education and expert working at the University Institute of Lisbon in Center for Research and Studies in Sociology, and I am primarily here as editorial board member of the European Toolkit for School Success. Before going deeper into the self-assessment tool on inclusion and well-being, I think it's important to acknowledge where this tool is located. And it is located on the European Toolkit for Schools, which is part of the European School Education, a European platform for school education. And the European Toolkit for School Success, I am sure that the teachers who are today in this webinar, or at least part of them, already know this toolkit. It was created in 2016, so almost 10 years ago. And it was present on the School Education Gateway platform, which doesn't exist anymore and is now relocated to the European School Education platform. This European Toolkit for School Success is aimed at school leaders, teachers, policymakers, and basically anybody working with schools. And as we know, many people work and should collaborate more with schools. And the objective of the European Toolkit for School Success is to disseminate promising practices. So the underlying logic and assumption of this European Toolkit for School Success is that many schools all over Europe are doing very, very good projects and very successful strategies to promote inclusion, to promote well-being, and to promote school success. But these practices sometimes remain unknown, and it's difficult to learn from each other, from what other colleagues sometimes in the same country as we are, or in other countries are doing. So the European Toolkit for School Success seeks to tackle this issue by disseminating these very promising practices. The logic that the European Toolkit for School Success follows is the whole school approach. In the past, we were concentrating on whole school approach specifically for tackling early school leaving. Today, we are talking more about promoting school success and promoting well-being. And this is achieved by placing the student at the center of attention and, of course, ensuring that all the other key actors like teachers, school leaders, parents, and local community services are also involved and are actually engaged in a cohesive, collective, and collaborative action. And there is a strong cross-sectoral cooperation with a wide range of stakeholders. The self-assessment tool on inclusion and well-being actually stems from the work that my colleague Anna just presented, these 11 recommendations on well-being and supportive learning environments. But it draws on a previous self-assessment tool that we had, and this self-assessment tool was specifically focused on inclusion in and around schools. And it is a tool that is not directed to policymakers. It's actually directed to school actors and especially school leaders and teachers. And the purpose of the tool is to provide a snapshot of the current state of a school's inclusion policies and practices and to provide some suggestions for future improvement. This tool was based on a report produced by the network of experts working on the social dimension of education and training, and it had a stronger emphasis on early school leaving prevention. And the tool also used to generate a personalized report with the areas where the schools already seem to be working well and others in which there is room for development. So taking this self-assessment tool on inclusion as a starting point, we developed together with the expert group the self-assessment tool on inclusion and well-being. So precisely taking into account the insights that the expert group has generated through these recommendations that were presented to you before, we updated the tool to ensure that the different indicators and the different sections reflect the concern with well-being and mental health of all learners, which was present in the formal tool, but was not very central. As you all know, these discussions on well-being and mental health are with us for quite many years now, but they got increasingly relevant after the COVID pandemic. And of course, after many studies started to emerge, highlighting the importance that well-being and mental health has for academic achievement and for positive school experience more generally. So based on these 11 recommendations, questions that were contained in the previous inclusion self-assessment tool were added. Some other questions were removed, some were merged, others were reformulated, and all this resulted in a comprehensive self-assessment tool that you will see in a few moments a little bit how it looks like. And then after this webinar, you will have the opportunity to engage with and to learn from. The tool, updated version of the tool, was tested by secondary school teachers integrating the European Commission Testing Teachers Panel. And in order to ensure usability, the editorial board of the European Toolkit for School Success, which is composed by education experts and practitioners, so myself, Eli, who is our moderator today, and also our colleague Daniela Bunea, we undertook a final review of this tool, and our objective was to ensure that the questions are clear, that their length is not excessive, and that the tool is user-friendly overall. So the previous tool was quite lengthy. The number of questions was significantly reduced, as well as the time that you need to complete the questionnaire. So we really encourage you to have a look, because it's not going to take too much of your time, and we believe that it's going to be very inspiring for you and very relevant for your work. So the self-assessment tool on inclusion and well-being is in fact designed to help schools reflect on and evaluate their current practices related to inclusion and to well-being, to identify the areas for improvement, but also to guide some future actions regarding this, and to build on research and best practices in European education systems. As I mentioned, one of the core objectives of the European Toolkit for School Success is precisely to disseminate these best practices, these evidence-based practices that are working in other schools in all over Europe, and that you can also try to use in your school. You don't have to take them exactly in the same manner that they are working in other school or in other country, but you can get inspired, you can adapt them to your own school, to your own realities, and you can also engage in communication with the schools and the colleagues who have developed these promising practices to create a network of support and collaboration. The self-assessment tool for inclusion and well-being contains 6 main indicators, 6 main areas, and these are connected to the school organization and pedagogical practice, the inclusion and the well-being promotion, teacher and school leadership for inclusive education, taking into account that teachers and school leaders are essential elements here in the discussion concerning inclusion and well-being. And I saw in the chat that a colleague was asking where are the teachers in the wheel that my colleague Anna presented. And in fact, we have a slice of the wheel specifically dedicated to well-being of staff. So we didn't refer specifically to teachers, but to school staff, in order to account also for the diverse professionals that are inserted in the school. But of course, very often when we talk about school staff, teachers are at the center of our attention. And there are 2 recommendations specifically dedicated to teachers, to their training and their well-being in the 11 recommendations that my colleague presented. Then another indicator is connected to the multidisciplinary focus on health and welfare issues in education. And here we need to acknowledge that schools alone cannot deal and should not deal with health and welfare issues. So there has to be multidisciplinary teams in place that are collaborating to support learners with diverse needs. Then another indicator is specifically connected to the more vulnerable individuals and groups, and accounting for the crucial importance of parents in children's and young people's education. There is an indicator specifically dedicated to parental involvement and family support. So just for you to have a glimpse of how the self-assessment tool looks like, is basically a questionnaire with a set of questions where you can answer to a great extent, to some extent, to a little extent, or no, I don't have this measure in place. And of course, if you don't know or the measure doesn't apply to your context, this is also a question, an answer that you can choose. And then at the end, you will get a report based on the answers that you have provided. So now I will give you a flavor of some of the questions that you can find in the self-assessment tool, and also explain why are they relevant and how you can get inspired from the self-assessment tool. So looking at the first indicator, school organization and pedagogical practice, you will find questions such as, does your school have a multidisciplinary team working on early warning and intervention systems? And here the rationale is that early warning systems are key in identifying students in need of additional support and further reducing disengagement and early school leaving. So in order to be able to design strategies for inclusion and mental health and well-being promotion, we actually have to be able to identify the needs of our students, and early warning systems have been shown here to be particularly successful in this endeavor. Then another question that you will find is connected to regularly collecting and analyzing data on student and teacher well-being, for instance, on the school experience, on mental health. So here we know from research that schools that regularly monitor well-being tend to achieve better mental health outcomes for students. So here, of course, if you are not monitoring student and teacher well-being, it's going to be quite difficult to develop strategies that are in line with the needs of the school community. So if you answer no or to a limited extent to this question, this is already a sign that this is something that could be considered in your school. Does your school provide alternatives to grade repetition? For instance, individualized learning support. And here, a grade repetition is widely known for its ineffectiveness, and the importance of providing alternative solutions is emphasized here. And once you get to the end of the self-assessment tool, you will get many recommendations of potential alternative solutions to grade repetition that are being implemented all over Europe, and you can get inspiration from. Regarding the inclusion and well-being promotion indicator, you will find questions such as, is a positive school climate explicitly communicated as a value and goal of your school? And here, of course, if you don't have a positive school climate specifically embedded in your school yearly plans and in the vision of your school, and then it's going to be more difficult to develop a positive school climate. And a positive school climate is actually the first recommendation of the expert group on well-being and supportive learning environments, because the experts have considered that this is actually a foundational step for promoting well-being. Without a positive school climate, we can have individual and isolated efforts to promote well-being, but it's going to be very difficult to reach this objective. So the entire school has to promote actively and proactively this positive school climate. Is substantial time allocated in your school to social and emotional education? The rationale of this question is that the social and emotional education has benefits that are widely recognized. Hence, the expert group placed this as a second recommendation for promoting well-being and mental health at school. So then sufficient time needs to be allocated to the development of social and emotional competences. Are teachers and school staff trained in social and emotional education? Another relevant question. Of course, without sufficient staff knowledge and training, the development of social and emotional learning may be jeopardized. I saw in the chat many colleagues complaining that do not get sufficient training on several topics that are of relevance to their work. Hence, recommendation 4 and recommendation 9 of the expert group is precisely connected to initial teacher education and continuous professional development. Teacher and school leadership for inclusive education. Here, for instance, we are asking if teachers have facilitated and free of charge access to professional development programs, be it on social and emotional learning, well-being, anti-discrimination, bullying prevention, conflict resolution, and other relevant topics. And again, teachers with specialized training will be more effective in supporting learners with diverse needs and will be themselves able to increase their mental health and well-being by being prepared for the challenges of the classroom and of the school. Another question that you will find is connected to teacher well-being. Is teacher well-being a concrete objective of the school, and are there measures in place to promote it? Here, the expert group considered that you cannot speak about student well-being without thinking about teacher well-being. So there is an intrinsic relationship here. Again, the schools and the colleagues who will answer no to this question is definitely a point for reflection why teacher well-being is not an objective of your school and measures are not in place to promote it, given the importance of teacher well-being. Are teacher collaboration and professional learning communities actively promoted in your school? Professional learning communities were also considered by the experts in recommendation 3 as very useful in improving teaching practices, but also increasing student achievement and well-being. So again, the same idea of the European Toolkit for School Success, some other teachers might have developed very, very impactful and very relevant pedagogical strategies, projects, interventions that not every teacher has to reinvent themselves. If you are involved in a learning community, in a professional learning community, you will learn from each other and you will be able to also implement these practices that other colleagues have been developing and adapting them further, and also teaching them to other colleagues through these professional learning communities. Then the fourth indicator connected to multidisciplinary focus on health and welfare issues in education, you will find questions such as this one. Is there a clear framework for cross-sectoral cooperation between local services and school to ensure support in areas in which your school does not have the relevant expertise? And here, the underlying assumption behind this question is that schools cannot have all the necessary expertise in-house. You cannot be doctors, you cannot be psychologists, you cannot be nurses at the same time as you are teachers. So you have to rely on available services inside the community and be able to collaborate with these services in this whole school approach framework. So again, connected to recommendation 3 of the expert group. Is psychological counseling readily available for students in your school? Here, acknowledging that schools that provide on-site mental health support can identify often invisible needs more effectively and reduce otherwise untreated mental health issues. So it's very easy to not see a mental health issue and hence not to tackle it, but providing psychological counseling is very relevant in this field. I see now that I have 1 minute left, so I will ask our kind moderator to give me a tolerance of 1 or 2 minutes to be able to finalize the remaining indicators.
Of course.
Thank you so much, Ellie. So then another question that you will find is connected to awareness programs for parents, teachers, and students on the importance of sufficient sleep, physical activity, balanced nutrition, and other relevant topics. So here the experts have identified core enablers of well-being and the strong connection between physical and mental health. So we can indeed have in our schools a very positive school climate, and we can have measures in place, but there are core enablers of well-being. We need to ensure that students are sleeping enough, are sleeping well, they are exercising, they have a balanced nutrition, and many, many other aspects that are connected to our physical health, but very much influencing our mental health. So then this is again a question for you to think about this type of awareness programs and where you can improve when it comes to these core enablers of well-being in your school. Regarding vulnerable individuals and groups, is, for instance, the diversity of learners represented in the school decision-making bodies. We know that all voices have to be heard, and decision-making bodies with diverse representation tend to increase the sense of belonging among minority students specifically. Are there free school meals available to those in need? So we know, of course, from research that free school meal programs are shown to increase attendance and academic performance. We know it's very difficult to learn on an empty stomach. Are minority and migrant children placed within the same age group as their peers in your school? Here we are trying to alert schools and teachers about potentially segregationist practices, which have a very, very negative impact on the well-being, mental health, and academic achievement of children with a diverse ethnic and migrant background. So rather than grouping them because they are migrants or from an ethnic minority, we have to place them together with the other colleagues in the same age group. Otherwise, segregation can occur. And finally, regarding parental involvement and family support, we are asking if your school actively promotes initiatives and programs for parental involvement, to account here for the importance of parental involvement initiatives, since again, schools cannot act effectively without the collaboration of parents. If you have measures in place to outreach to those families that might have higher levels of need. And here very recently we had the opportunity to see this homeschool community liaison scheme in Ireland, where a teacher has dedicated time, is actually full-time concerned and tasked with this parental engagement responsibility and outreaches to families, and even goes on home visits. Again, the roles of parents and families in the education of their children is very important. So are there any programs for parental literacy and pedagogical training available at your school? This is a very important element for disadvantaged groups whose parents cannot support them at home. And in the current debate on basic skills underachievement, this is a very important element. So to finalize, once you answer all these questions, you will get a personalized report. And this report is not designed to grade your school, but to help you reflect on your current practices. You will have the report available in PDF and on your dashboard on the school education platform, and then you will receive relevant resources and examples of good practices from the European Toolkit for Schools. Here you can see on the different indicators, for instance, inclusion and well-being promotion. Imagine that your score was 59, so you imagine 59%, you imagine there is improvement there, and here you get concrete indications of resources that you can get inspired from, and you can even click here to go and explore more resources and well-being. So I am 4 minutes almost beyond my time. Thank you very much. I hope it was useful, and we are, of course, available for questions.
Thank you, Cosmin. You speed up a little bit, but okay. Thank you very much for guiding us through the practical application of the self-assessment tool. As we can see in the comments, participants are very happy to see the tool, and they have positive feedback. Thank you, Oana and Matilda, for answering all the comments and questions in the chat. So we will come back a little bit later, Cosmin, to you. We don't have much time, but I would like to invite Oana. First, I would like to invite participants to share very briefly what are your first impressions on the tool. Maybe you can share it with us. Very a small comment on how you see it. Is it useful? I think this is very important feedback for the Commission and for all of us who are participating in it. And now, Oana, I would like to give you a floor for a small recap, brief recap of the key points presented. And maybe if you go back to the guidelines, and that will be my question for Anna as well. I see in the chat that some of the participants posted that schools need also to think about teachers' mental health. not only pupils. And I noticed that that comment had lots of positive reactions. So maybe from the perception of the Commission and your initiatives, how would you comment that, and what would be a recap of things that we heard today?
Thanks a lot, Ellie. And indeed, I saw that comment and I would like to address it. But first of all, thank you very much for all this positive reaction we are seeing on the tool. Just starting first with a recap, you have heard in the discourse of our Director General, Mrs. Arenkilde Hansen, how important well-being and mental health is. And on my side, having accompanied this work since 2022 with this initiative, which is called Pathways to School Success, I can only see the different pieces being brought together. So this initiative, Pathways to School Success, was a major shift in how we look at European level at education policies, because before focusing a lot on early school leaving, now we step forward towards a more integrated approach where school success is seen in terms of first school engagement, well-being at school, and achievement. So all three components need to be brought together. And with the work on well-being at school, so we see well-being at school cannot be at the detriment of school success and vice versa. We need both quality and excellence and supporting environment to enable children to reach their full potential, no matter what their personal history, their background, their vulnerabilities or factors which challenge them. And what also we do not speak enough, but it's present in all this work, it's this education centered around the rights of the child to education, but right of the child to have a voice, to express an opinion, and of course the right to have to be safe and protected. So all these ingredients have been captured in the work that Anna Kosmin have been doing with these guidelines. I can also, what I can say, these are ingredients of a much wider puzzle, because with the adoption of Pathways to School Success Council recommendation, which in fact it is a legal document, a supportive document to member states, we have the same conversation with education policy makers in your countries. And that is why, in fact, the guidelines have two versions, one for policymakers and one for schools. That is why we try to get the message through across all channels. If I were very briefly to capture the essence of this 11th recommendation and this approach, very high focus on prevention. Prevention when we look from the perspective of universal measures, but prevention also from inclusion and building equity. If we look at mental health perspective, an equitable system, it's a protective factor against developing later on in life mental health concerns. And this goes rightfully mentioned by many of you, teacher well-being. Correlation and symbiosis between teacher well-being and student achievement is very high. So that is why we need to look at both in parallel, how we support them. It's not only about training of teacher, but it's also about how to build support that they need in schools via peers, via leadership, via the environment, but also via the external competencies from health, welfare, all these systems that need to function around the school. So this is my second message: the need to build strong networks and to bring down the walls around the schools. And third message, it's really about building this capacity of all the actors, from the policymakers to the schools in in embracing this new approach by looking at education. And from my perspective, I would say I see it, in fact, as the beginning. It's now we launch this tool that we really hope to serve you schools in reflecting and looking at these issues. But I think it's also the beginning of this work, because we see such a shift in the education sector, also in the teaching profession, with the impact of the artificial intelligence. So attention to well-being and this human aspect of teachers, it's something that it's unique. So it's something for definitely it will continue in the future. What's ahead of us in the future, not to how should I say, enter too much in detail at this stage, but the European Commission adopted an action plan on basic skills on the 5th of March, and part of this are several building blocks which are of key importance. One being teacher training, a European teacher and training agenda foreseen for 2026, complemented by other key actions. So a basic skill support scheme, which will come up next year, and also a European School Alliance, which is built on Erasmus Plus program. In what concerns Erasmus Plus program, we also enhanced, as of last year, funding of projects that develop well-being at school. And those of you who are familiar with Key Action 2 cooperation projects in the field of school education might have noticed already there is a new priority on well-being at school. And for the time being, I will stop here, because we are also about the time.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, we're out of time, but I wanted to ask only one question to Anna and Cosmin that I found very relevant, and I see that Cosmin is already answering all the questions in the chat. So one question at the beginning of one comment actually at the beginning of Anna's speech was that teachers need training to identify mental and emotional issues among pupils. And then there was one comment which said we need training on many topics, but somehow we are still on our own and we need to manage on our own. So Anna, maybe if you can have a little comment on that, and then Cosmin as well, and then we need to stop. I'm sorry, it's such an interesting topic, and thank you all for sharing your thoughts in the chat. Anna?
Yeah, I think these comments are really important to address, right? I think also in the expert group, teacher well-being on the one hand was a topic of discussion and focus, as we realized that this is very important to address, not only to foster the well-being of students, but also the whole school approach to well-being and learning. And to achieve that, I think the professional development and the support in that, it's essential. And therefore also teacher training programs we need to include in these efforts that we're now trying to do. I think that's my short answer. And I hope that we can set the first steps to acknowledge not only the topic, but also the knowledge, and then also the support within the school for teachers in recognizing these the mental health issues at stake from themselves and of their students. I want to give the word to Cosmin for a final word. Thank you so much as well for everyone here. And thank you also, Eli, for moderating.
Thank you, Anna. Cosmin, would you like to add something?
Yes, thank you. So totally agree and understand these comments from teachers regarding the need for more training and more support regarding this identification of needs, but also once we identify those needs, what we can do, because also that is not always very clear and very straightforward. And here I would say that the recommendations that the expert group put together really account for this need, because two recommendations are dedicated to teachers and to teacher training. So one is specifically connected to initial teacher education and the other to continuous professional development. And it's important to recall that these recommendations are come in two versions. One is for policymakers and one is for schools. So more training and better training opportunities also have to come from a policy level, from a national level, from a regional level. And then there are other training aspects that can be covered in your school. As I was saying, some of your colleagues might be doing wonderful things when it comes to identifying needs and tackling them. But since in some schools there is not a lot of communication and there is no professional community in place, then it's difficult to know what the others are doing and to learn from each other. So these are two different levels that can definitely be improved, and these recommendations together with the self-assessment tool can lead to that.
Exactly. Thank you, Cosmin. I think the very nice comment that we received, I think you already answered to that, is that someone can imagine filling the report with a multidisciplinary team. For example, on the school level, I saw that Anna mentioned that the toolkit will be translated to children's language, because children are translating it. Anna?
Yeah, not the toolkit, the guidelines. So the
Yeah,
guidelines,
have
been given now to a group of children with the help of Eurochild and Learning for Wellbeing foundations. So they are currently conducting a workshop with children. They take ownership on these guidelines and will come up with a set of guidelines, but from their perspective. What does this mean to them? And it will be, in a sense, their recommendation to us as adults, but also as policymakers, educators, and so on. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. We expect it to come out somewhere in autumn.
Okay, thank you all for joining us today for this, as I can see from the comments, very important and inspiring webinar. And I hope that we will meet again on the same topic, because there are so many questions that we didn't have time to answer. Thank you all for joining. I hope that you find it very useful, but I can see that you find it very useful. But Maria Elena, I think, already shared link to the evaluation of the webinar, so please be that kind to fill the evaluation from today's webinar. I would also like to thank all our speakers with their valuable contributions. Thank you very much. It was great to have you all on board. And before we close, I encourage you all to explore the tools on the website. All the links were shared in the chat. And also to share it within your schools, within your networks, professional community, and to use it. I think it's the most it was developed to be used. And thank you once again for your engagement, for all your comments, a very positive one. I think we are very happy to see the first positive reaction on the tools and materials that we presented. I'm wishing you a great rest of the day, and goodbye to all, and thank you for joining.